John Wayne Gacy, also known as the Killer Clown, was a convicted serial killer who murdered 33 young men and boys between 1972 and 1978. Gacy was executed by lethal injection in Illinois on May 10, 1994, for his horrific crimes. Gacy's execution was met with mixed emotions. While many people felt that justice had finally been served, others were opposed to the death penalty and protested against the execution. Gacy himself was calm and composed in the hours leading up to his execution. He ate a final meal of fried chicken, French fries, and strawberries, and spent time with his family and his spiritual advisor. At 12:58 a.m. on May 10th, Gacy was led into the execution chamber. He was strapped to a gurney and had 4 lines inserted into his arms. He made no final statement, but instead chose to silently read a Bible. At 1:03 a.m., the lethal injection was administered. Gacy's body convulsed briefly, and he let out a deep sigh before falling silent. He was pronounced dead at 12:58 a.m. The execution of John Wayne Gacy marked the end of a dark chapter in American history. While the horror of his crimes will never be forgotten, his death brought a sense of closure to the families of his victims and served as a warning to others who would consider committing such atrocities. Aileen Wuornos was a convicted serial killer who gained notoriety in the late 1980s and early 1990s for murdering 7 men in Florida. Wuornos' troubled childhood, combined with a life of prostitution and drug abuse, is often cited as contributing factors to her crimes. Wuornos was convicted of murder in 1992 and sentenced to death. She spent over a decade on death row, during which time she maintained her innocence and claimed that she had killed her victims in self-defense. On October 9, 2002, Wuornos was executed by lethal injection in Florida. Her execution was highly controversial, with many people arguing that her troubled past and mental health issues should have been taken into account. In the hours leading up to her execution, Wuornos was described as calm and resigned to her fate. She had a final meal of a cup of coffee and a bag of potato chips and spent time with her spiritual advisor. At 9:47 a.m., Wuornos was led into the execution chamber. She declined to make a final statement, but instead read a poem she had written called Death is the Awakening. At 9:53 a.m., the lethal injection was administered. Wuornos' body convulsed briefly, and she appeared to gasp for air before falling still. She was pronounced dead at 9:47 a.m. The execution of Aileen Wuornos remains a controversial and unsettling event. While her crimes were undeniably horrific, many people question whether the death penalty was an appropriate punishment for someone with such a troubled past and mental health issues. Nonetheless, her execution marked the end of a dark chapter in American criminal history. Gary Ridgeway, also known as the Green River Killer, was a convicted serial killer who murdered at least 49 women in the Seattle area between 1982 and 1998. He was known for targeting vulnerable young women, many of whom were sex workers. Ridgeway was arrested in 2001 and eventually pleaded guilty to 48 counts of murder in exchange for a life sentence without the possibility of parole. He was spared the death penalty due to a plea bargain agreement. Despite the plea bargain, Ridgeway's heinous crimes continued to haunt the families of his victims and the community at large. In 2010, he was transferred to a maximum security prison in Colorado, where he spent the remainder of his life. Ridgeway died of natural causes on November 19, 2021, at the age of 72. His death brought a sense of closure to the families of his victims and marked the end of one of the most notorious and chilling serial killer cases in American history. While Ridgeway was never executed for his crimes, the impact of his heinous acts will be felt for generations to come. His name will forever be associated with the pain and suffering he inflicted on his victims and their families, and his case serves as a reminder of the need for vigilance and justice in the face of evil. Timothy McVeigh was a domestic terrorist who carried out the Oklahoma City bombing on April 19, 1995. The bombing, which targeted a federal building, resulted in the deaths of 168 people and injured over 600 others. It remains the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in American history. McVeigh was arrested shortly after the bombing and was found guilty of 11 counts of murder and conspiracy. He was sentenced to death and spent several years on death row before his execution. On June 11, 2001, McVeigh was executed by lethal injection at a federal prison in Indiana. His execution was broadcast on closed-circuit television to the families of his victims, as well as to members of the media. McVeigh's last words were a poem called Invictus by William Ernest Henley. He then closed his eyes and died within minutes of the lethal injection being administered. The execution of Timothy McVeigh marked the end of a devastating chapter in American history. While McVeigh's motivations for carrying out the Oklahoma City bombing remain a subject of debate, his act of terror had a profound impact on the country and forever changed the way in which we think about domestic terrorism. Jeffrey Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, was a convicted serial killer and sex offender who murdered 17 men and boys between 1978 and 1991. He gained notoriety for his gruesome acts, which included dismemberment, necrophilia, and cannibalism. Dahmer was arrested in 1991 after one of his intended victims managed to escape and alert the police. He was eventually charged with 15 counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was beaten to death by a fellow inmate in the Columbia Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. His death marked the end of one of the most chilling and disturbing serial killer cases in American history. While Dahmer's execution was not carried out through legal means, it served as a grim reminder of the horrific nature of his crimes. His case also sparked debates about the death penalty and the treatment of inmates in the American prison system. The legacy of Jeffrey Dahmer remains a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity. His acts of violence and cruelty continue to shock and horrify us, and his case serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilant law enforcement and the need to address mental illness and other underlying factors that may contribute to such horrific acts. Andrei Chicatillo, also known as the Butcher of Rostov, was a Soviet serial killer who murdered at least 52 women and children between 1978 and 1990. He was known for his gruesome acts of violence, which included mutilation, cannibalism, and necrophilia. Chicatillo was eventually arrested in 1990 after a lengthy investigation, and he was found guilty of 52 counts of murder in 1992. He was sentenced to death and was executed by a single gunshot to the head on February 14, 1994. Chicatillo's execution marked the end of one of the most chilling and brutal serial killer cases in history. His crimes shocked and horrified the world, and his case served as a stark reminder of the dark side of human nature. The legacy of Andrei Chicatillo continues to haunt us to this day. His case highlights the need for strong law enforcement and a commitment to justice in the face of unspeakable acts of violence. It also underscores the importance of understanding the underlying psychological and social factors that may contribute to the development of such monstrous behavior. Albert Fish, also known as the Gray Man, was an American serial killer who committed several heinous crimes between 1924 and 1934. He was known for his sadomasochistic tendencies, cannibalism, and perverse sexual practices. Fish was eventually caught in 1934 after sending a letter to one of his victim's parents, which led to his arrest and eventual confession. He was found guilty of the kidnapping and murder of Grace Budd and was sentenced to death. On January 16, 1936, Fish was executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing Correctional Facility. His execution was carried out amid protests from some who believed he was not mentally competent to stand trial. The case of Albert Fish remains one of the most chilling and disturbing in American history. His acts of violence and depravity continue to shock and horrify us, and his case highlights the importance of understanding the complexities of mental illness and the need for effective treatment and support for those who may be at risk of committing such acts. The legacy of Albert Fish is one of darkness and despair. His case serves as a haunting reminder of the depths of human depravity and the need for vigilance in the face of unspeakable acts of violence. Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, was an American serial killer and rapist who terrorized the Los Angeles area in the mid-1980s. He was known for his brutal acts of violence, which included home invasions, sexual assaults, and murder. Ramirez was eventually caught in 1985 after a lengthy investigation, and he was found guilty of 13 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, and 11 counts of sexual assault. He was sentenced to death in 1989. On June 7, 2013, Ramirez died of natural causes while on death row at San Quentin State Prison. His execution was never carried out, but the memory of his horrific crimes remains fresh in the minds of many. The case of Richard Ramirez continues to haunt us to this day. His acts of violence and terror caused widespread fear and panic in the Los Angeles area, and his legacy serves as a chilling reminder of the potential for evil within the human psyche. The story of Richard Ramirez highlights the importance of strong law enforcement and a commitment to justice in the face of unspeakable acts of violence. It also underscores the need for a better understanding of the social and psychological factors that may contribute to the development of such monstrous behavior. David Berkowitz, also known as the Son of Sam, was an American serial killer who terrorized New York City in the late 1970s. He was known for his random attacks on young couples, which left 6 people dead and several others injured. Berkowitz was eventually caught in 1977 after a lengthy investigation, and he pleaded guilty to the murders. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison for each murder, and he has been incarcerated ever since. Berkowitz's case remains one of the most chilling and disturbing in American history. His acts of violence and terror caused widespread fear and panic in New York City, and his case highlighted the potential for evil within the human psyche. Although Berkowitz was not executed, the memory of his horrific crimes remains fresh in the minds of many. The legacy of the Son of Sam serves as a haunting reminder of the need for strong law enforcement and a commitment to justice in the face of unspeakable acts of violence. The story of David Berkowitz underscores the importance of understanding the social and psychological factors that may contribute to the development of such monstrous behavior. It also highlights the need for effective treatment and support for those who may be at risk of committing such acts, in order to prevent further tragedies from occurring. Ted Bundy was an American serial killer and rapist who committed numerous heinous crimes in the 1970s. He was known for his charming demeanor and good looks, which he used to lure his victims to their deaths. Bundy was eventually caught in 1978 and was found guilty of the murder of 2 women in Florida. He was also suspected in several other murders throughout the United States. Bundy was sentenced to death and spent years on death row, fighting his conviction through multiple appeals. On January 24, 1989, Bundy was executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. His execution was carried out amid much controversy and media attention. The case of Ted Bundy remains one of the most chilling and disturbing in American history. His acts of violence and terror caused widespread fear and panic in the communities where he operated, and his case highlighted the potential for evil within the human psyche. The legacy of Ted Bundy is one of darkness and despair. His case serves as a haunting reminder of the need for strong law enforcement and a commitment to justice in the face of unspeakable acts of violence. It also underscores the importance of understanding the social and psychological factors that may contribute to the development of such monstrous behavior and the need for effective treatment and support for those who may be at risk of committing such acts.